and yet most of us don't include this into our analysis. Disparity. Emergency products that are used to produce ultra-processed food, which in turn makes us sick. And 40% of food is tragically wasted. The industrial system is not designed to feed and nourish all people equally and fully. So finally, no one is more of an expert, quote unquote, and qualified to speak about the injustices of our food system and food insecurity than those most directly impacted. We fully recognize that we do not have anyone on the panel with lived experience. It was considered, but did not come to fruition. So perhaps we will get to a place of safety and solidarity within our community where we will engage on a deeper level. So we are going to turn the conversation over to our panelists. I'm then going to come back up. I'm going to take you through a few slides, and then we're going to open it up and hear from all of you. Question number one is to introduce yourself and tell us about your work. And we're going to start with Demetria Nelson, the Commissioner of the Department of Human Services here in Greenwich.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you, everyone. So as Allie mentioned, my name is Demetria Nelson. I'm the Commissioner of the Greenwich Department of Human Services. And we work to support those in town who are historically underserved, who may need assistance in connecting to various resources. They need direction, possibly more intensive case management. We're able to collect initial data to see where the need is so that we can help support clients in their immediate concerns, but also address longer-term concerns.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm Rob Moore. I'm the VP of Community Impact at Greenwich United Way. I was born and raised here in Greenwich, and I went to the Greenwich public school system, so I know very well about this community and what we're trying to talk about tonight. Some of my history in the food justice space goes back to my work in New York City, where I led some senior-run community farmers markets and food box programs. And I'm excited to be here tonight.
Thank you, Allie, and everyone for being here. I'm Danielle Blaine. I'm the former Fairfield County Site Director and current Greenwich Community Liaison for Food Rescue US. Just a little bit about Food Rescue US, for those who don't know, we're a national nonprofit with 42 sites in the United States. We work on two critical issues of today, which is hunger and food waste. 30 to 40% of our fresh edible food ends up in the waste stream, and there are over 30 to 40 million people in the United States that are hungry. This just doesn't make sense. In Greenwich, we know that there are several thousands of people who are hungry, and we're throwing away food assets that they could be using. Food Rescue US uses a web-based app, and we engage volunteers. We have a schedule that they can log into to help try to pick up food at our local grocery stores, schools, stores, anywhere there's food, farms. And the volunteers will pick it up and bring it to the sites that we work with, the agencies here in town. We work with 6 of them, and many of them are here tonight. We have Barbara's House, we have Neighbor to Neighbor, Jewish Family Services, I'm sorry, Boys and Girls Club, yes, and Agnes Morley, Senior Housing, and Kids in Crisis.
So Demetria, what defines food insecurity in Greenwich, and what leads to food insecurity? And I'm holding that in the context of what is the Department of Human Services? What role do you play? I know you refer people to different agencies. How do people access? Tell us more a little bit about the operational aspect of your work.
Sure. Yes. So I'll start out with a definition of food insecurity for the town of Greenwich. When I think about that, I first think about the larger definition when you're thinking about the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and you think about the social drivers of health. And if you look at that domain, that is the economic stability. Within that domain, there's the concern related to food insecurity. And when I think about Greenwich, I think about those two definitions in terms of low food security and very low food security. So that could be the quality, access to food, but also being able to purchase food and having funds to do so. So the clients that we come in contact experience both types of food insecurity within the town of Greenwich. And then in reference to what causes food insecurity, there are multiple causes for food insecurity. But if we think about unemployment, underemployment, we think about those that may have low incomes, again, referring back to not having access. I think if we think about Greenwich, we think about all of the supermarkets in Greenwich. Oh, okay, yes, we have enough food so that everyone should be able to go, but does every supermarket accept SNAP? Do they accept WIC? Are they close enough so if someone doesn't have a car or is unable to pay for a ride share, or if they have to walk, can they get there on a regular basis and get the food that they need that not only fills their bellies, but also ensures their greater health? So when we're talking about what causes it, there are multiple causes of it. And in the department, we look at addressing those immediate needs. We have, every month, Linda and I look at, readmissions that we have for the department. And we look at the causes for those readmissions. And the leading cause for us has been a referral or a request for referral to address food insecurity. And specifically, it's been related to a potential referral to neighbor. So we know when people come in for requests, they have an immediate need that they've identified. So we look at what their full picture is in terms of economics. We take a full cycle social history because we know that there are underlying factors. Yes, we do have food cards on site where we can give people immediate assistance and access. We can connect them to neighbor, to shopping for seniors through JFS of Greenwich. We can connect them to Barbara's House or Meals on Wheels or these other resources that are available, but then we take a look on a larger level, what else is happening? Do we have to assist someone in getting connected to a type of training maybe that they can go to increase their ability to earn more? Do we have to connect them with various other resources?
So do people need to go through your department in order to receive support from, let's say, neighbor to neighbor or Barbara's House?
So we're the primary referral source for neighbor to neighbor, but they may go directly to neighbor if there's an immediate emergency need, but the neighbor to neighbor will refer them back to us so that we can meet those larger needs.
Another quick question before we move on to Rob. Do you have families or individuals who come to you and say, I have to walk to the grocery store and I don't have a car, or the bus line? Like, what are those barriers for families in accessing food in Greenwich?
Yes, so all of those. So we do have families that come to us and say that they cannot, the transportation is not there for them to regularly be able to go to the supermarket. So there's other things that we can do. If the bus line does stop at a particular supermarket where they want to go to, we do provide bus passes. There's also alternate forms of transportation that we are able to assist people with securing. And what we will look at too is, for the individual that is asking us for assistance, what will work best for them to meet their issue related to food insecurity? If we have a client that isn't able to cook like they used to, or they are afraid of food waste if they go to neighbor, so it might be a client that we would refer to Meals on Wheels and help support that client in funding that type of support.
And I actually do have another question, but before, well, okay. So Rob is going to be our stats guy tonight. He has all the numbers. So if you could help us understand by the numbers based on the United Way 2019 needs assessment, which I think a lot of us here tonight are familiar with. And I know the United Way did an incredible job with that, as well as the latest Alice report. If you could break down the statistics and findings of those reports, and also please let us know the role of the Greenwich United Way in addressing food insecurity.
Yeah, I kind of skipped over that in the intro. Greenwich United Way works to ensure that everyone is healthy, educated, and self-sufficient in Greenwich. And we work in various ways. One of the main ways we work is through grant making. So we raise funds and provide grants to nonprofit organizations that are working in the food insecurity space. And then 2, we provide direct services. And then 3, we convene partners. So 3 lines of work. Tonight, I'm going to really highlight the recent Alice report that just came out. And you can also take a look at this on your phones or on your own time by visiting alice.ctunitedway.org. And what ALICE is ALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited Income Constrained But Employed, representing the growing number of single adults and families who earn less than the basic cost of living, which is below the ALICE threshold. And that basic cost of living in 2021 is $127,000, $127,000 roughly in Greenwich. And if you apply the earned income tax credits, that brings it down to $112,000. But what Connecticut United Way finally did was provide an inflation projection. So what is the cost to get by in Greenwich in 2023? And that number is roughly $151,000 for a family of 4. So when you're looking at the household survival budget for 2021, going back to that $127,000 number, for a family of 4 every month just to get by on food, that's $1,400 roughly that they're spending. Another important statistic is the number of free and reduced price lunch students that are in Greenwich. And that is approximately 1,500 students that attend school in the public schools that qualify for free and reduced price lunch. And that's kind of where I want to leave it at for now.
Yeah. And I think if I'm correct, and Brent, I know you can speak to this at some point, that the impetus for the conversation that we had in March around breaking down stigma was because there are a lot of people who are eligible but don't seek assistance. And so I know that Brent at Neighbor to Neighbor and certainly the United Way are trying to better understand why that might be.
Yeah, and another thing I'd like to just do a quick, if you can put your hand up is, raise your hand if you is entitled to a. Oh, okay. Most people don't know that, but yes, that's one way, to bring down that cost is to ensure every kid has access to breakfast before they start their school day. So.
And I'm proud to say that Connecticut just passed that legislation. Universal school meals was up before legislature, and our Representative Rachel Khanna was very supportive of that initiative. And we're going to actually touch on that later, but the 90 million did not pass, but breakfast did at 16. So very proud of that. So Danielle, if you could talk, and Daniel's going to represent Gabby, so we're gonna touch on both the work of Food Rescue and Barbara's House. If you can talk about families who are food insecure and what do you see, and really what are their needs in your experience?
Well, as best I can, I'm going to represent Gabby Ratner from Barbara's House, who should have been here tonight, but as Allie said, she needed to be where her heart and her mind are right now. Gabby has sent me a write-up on what Barbara's House does, and I know Janet Stone McGinnon is also here, Board of Directors, and also the first select person. And I think someone else from Barbara's House is here. Alma, is she here? I saw her on the list, but no. Okay, so we may have questions for Janet, who's on the board. But this is what Gabby has sent. Barbara's House, which many of you know as Community Centers Inc. or CCI, was founded nearly 70 years ago. It's a social service agency providing support to low-income, high-needs families of children, senior citizens, and others who live in the Greenwich communities, many in the Greenwich Housing Authority homes. Barbara's House engagement with food insecurity began during the pandemic when we started delivering the food and snacks we were receiving for after-school programs to the homes of the children in those programs. During those very early days, Barbara's House and many other of the nonprofit volunteers and Barbara's House's volunteers were often the only people on the roads as they delivered food. The need grew rapidly, and Barbara's House expanded its program in partnership with Food Rescue US to begin delivering fresh foods, prepared foods, produce, and staples 3 times a week to families and to the elderly living alone in subsidized housing. At the height of the program, Barbara's House was providing food to nearly 350 people 3 times a week. One of the things we learned during that awful time was the limitations of food stamps, which are not accepted online for online food services and do not go very far when a family is suddenly out of work and has no income to augment the subsidy. This could happen to any one of us. We were fortunate in being supported by area nonprofit and government agencies, along with private companies who enabled us to expand our offerings each week. One thing during that time was most important to us was to preserve families' dignity. As much as possible, we provided fresh ingredients so that families could cook for themselves in the manner and custom that they were used to. Today, we continue to provide to some families, and each Thanksgiving, we provide enormous boxes of food to 75 families and 100 meals to senior citizens. This is supported by Food Rescue US and Chef Juan Benitez and Food for Fairfield. There's a surprising amount of hunger in the midst of enormous plenty. And that was for Gabby. And just a little insight onto some of her families that she has and works with, some of her clients, one being from one of them I think is from, well, 2 of them from Agnes Morley. Some senior citizens wrote, "We have a whole bunch of us who look forward to the food deliveries here, especially now since the extra food stamps got dropped with COVID funds discontinuing and the increase of groceries. This service has been extremely helpful. My neighbors are thanking Barbara's House more these days than ever before. I think that if we did not have this program to depend on, some of us would be in dire straits. I know that I personally would have a problem because it's been a long time since I've depleted my SNAP benefits due to the COVID benefits ending." And lastly, the socializing and volunteering efforts of all involved has been quite rewarding. We all look forward to the activities involved in receiving, sorting, and distributing the food in a fair and equitable manner. The rescued food has been an important supplement to the seniors' already meager food budget. Personally, it's nice to have the nourishment of an additional meal, snack, or dessert per week that they get to choose. Bread is always a hit. The community has been enriched by the twice a week interactions, and tenants line up in advance of the scheduled distribution to have the first crack at their favorite items. Word has been spread, so we anticipate this every week, and we love building community. So those are some of the seniors that we service. They usually prefer prepared foods. We have some that will deliver to them from, we have many in the area. We have Whole Foods and King's and many of our other food distributions. People will help to bring that for the seniors, but many people don't think of them. They think of, we also help she helps the after school children, but the seniors are very much in need as well because of their low income budgets. There's some more pages there.
I have a question about SNAP, and obviously SNAP ending. And Dimitri, if you could help us understand the allocation of SNAP. I think the Department of Human Services oversees SNAP or doesn't, and this is where I get confused. You do WIC. You're focused. You do WIC only. You don't. Okay, so break that down.
So in general, I'll just tell you about if
Yeah.
someone needs access to those particular services. Those are administered by the Connecticut State, by the Department of Social Services. So if a client does need assistance, we will help them apply for SNAP because many clients, there's just a lot of information that needs to be collected, that needs to be updated. But we also are working and have worked with Greenwich United Way to get the word out about how people can do that independently, because we go back to the fact that there is a stigma associated with asking for help. We want to reduce that stigma, but until we get to that point, we know that it still exists. So we do have that information readily available, and anyone can go to connecticut.gov and look up and begin the SNAP application. And then for WIC, again, administered by the state, funded by federal funds. But the Department of Health here in Greenwich coordinated someone from our local WIC office coming to the Department of Human Services, actually to the whole town of Greenwich once a month. So if someone does need assistance with applying for WIC, they can initiate the application and also do follow-ups. So there are multiple departments within Greenwich that are working to increase access for people and provide them guidance when needed and assistance.
And do we know what grocery stores and what food markets accept SNAP and WIC?
Well, I don't have the list in front of me and feel uncomfortable
Right.
saying, because I don't want to miss, but
Yeah.
there are some that do not.
Okay.
Forgive me if I'm misspeaking. I know Cinderella, I believe they do not accept SNAP or
Okay.
WIC. So
And that's important because
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
western part of town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to touch on, then I'm going to take some questions from all of you.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Actually, when speaking about SNAP and WIC, if anyone wants to know about any of the changing statistics related to it, how many people are receiving WIC, you can go to the Connecticut State Department's website. You can Google Connecticut DSS data and dashboards, and there is an active dashboard that you can access, and you could look to see how many people are being served by the various programs that are administered by the Connecticut Department of Social Services. So that'll give you a better look. I would say right now, when I looked at the data for 2003, they do it by calendar year. So I'll give you the statistics for 2023 rather. So I'll give you the statistics for 2022. So it looks as though there's 2.7% of the population is receiving a SNAP. But then if you look at the Greenwich United Way's data for their needs assessment, there's potentially about 9.7% of the population that is eligible for SNAP. So there's a huge disparity there.
Right. And so Reggie St. Colin, who is with us tonight, is one of the authors, if that's the right framing, of the Office of the Food Advocate is how it started. It landed with a position of food policy analyst. And at some point, do you want to maybe speak to that, now, Reggie. Reggie, I know that's definitely like, but the reason being that, food insecurity and the data is a little bit all over the place and somewhat inconsistent, making it very difficult for people who are food insecure to know how to resource the support that they need. And so Reggie, as a food justice thought leader in Connecticut, has done a phenomenal job in getting that bill passed, and it passed this past legislative season. Yeah, come on up.
So yeah, what is it? Yeah.
The position, like what will
Oh, the position. So the policy is called like HB 6854. The whole name is like the Office of Food Nutrition Analyst and Tax Incentives for Food Deserts in Connecticut. So right now, if you have 13 questions about food, there's 13 different offices you have to talk to. This changes it and consolidates it into one. It also makes it easier. It does a bunch of stuff. Another thing is like kind of like Zillow. Like if you're hungry, it shouldn't, if you move, let's say you move from Greenwich to Fairfield, it shouldn't take you 3 months to find food. You should be able to put your address in and say 1.1 mile away, there's a grocery store. 1.2, there's a food rescue organization. You live in a place you take SNAP, this, and that, and all that. Does that. This position also is going to be working with Department of Ag to, so Connecticut has 67 food deserts. That's fourth in the nation. We're like 3 hours wide and 3 hours tall. That makes no sense. So this person would work with the Department of Ag and other people in the government to figure out why that's happening and what tax incentives would help change that, because Bridgeport problems aren't Putnam problems. Like we're 19 miles. The transportation is not much of an issue as places where there's like 5 miles for every place. So yeah, that's effectively what it does. All right, thanks for the time.
So the next set of questions are addressing really, large part as to why we are here this evening, which is, conflicting narratives and the contradiction around the perception of food insecurity and the reality of what people face. So I'm going to present that question to all of you. Rob, if you maybe want to take that first, and then, are there tools that you don't have that would help you, be more impactful? So if you can intertwine those two answers.
Yeah, so first I just wanted to add too that to be eligible for free and reduced price lunch in Greenwich for a family of 4, you have to make $55,000 or less. And so when you're thinking again, like the number I just presented, where just to get by in Greenwich, you have to make $150,000. There's that huge gap. And that's why we're here today, is to come up with solutions to try to address that gap where those families that may not be eligible for some of those services, and we know it costs a lot to live in Greenwich, how can we support them and make food access more secure? What was the question again? Sorry, I wanted to get that out there.
Yep. So the contradiction between the perception of food insecurity and the reality of what people face.
Yeah, I think, again, there's just that widening gap of what it costs to put food on the table and what those families do for work. So again, if you just think back to the $150,000 to get by, that kind of changes the Alice narrative, where, to make $150,000, your job occupation is going to change, and the look and feel of an Alice family or person changes with that. And I think that kind of changes a lot of the perceptions and narrative around food insecurity and access.
And then actually, if you can touch on the stigma and how are you in the United Way and Food Rescue and the Department of Human Services, how are you creating a space where you're beginning to debunk that, to demystify that stigma?
I think first is just putting data out there. So that was a huge effort of ours with the 2020 needs assessment, and then working with partners and listening to them, trying to get a better understanding of the population they're serving, and then, like Dimitri had mentioned before, reaching out to DHS to say, hey, this is the data, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a gap of people who are eligible that are actually signed up for SNAP. What are some ways we can work together to break the stigma and raise awareness about this? So.
was going to say, we've been in past meetings where the Greenwich High School students that could actually receive free and reduced lunch don't go to receive that food because of the stigma. They don't want to be different from their peers. They don't want to be singled out. It was hopeful that there would be lunch for all so that we didn't have this type of situation, but they're looking for ways to try to make it so that it's not as uncomfortable for those students to receive lunch in those ways. An interesting story was because we work all across Fairfield County, the Stanford Yukon office opened the satellite there opened their food pantry. And I met with Professor Bunyan, who started the food pantry there a couple of years ago during the pandemic. And she said to me that a large percentage of students were actually from Greenwich. And though we know that, and we know that there's a large percentage of families and children here that are food insecure, for some reason, hearing that at the college level really bothered me as well. We know that there's 30 to 40% of students at colleges are food insecure, and they also can't afford many other items that they need. So she set up a food pantry that has food, feminine products, but the way she tries to reduce the stigma around this is that she'll have pizza day where anyone can come. So those students don't feel funny if they're hungry going to take food. So they've been working hard to try to decrease the stigma there on that.
Yes, when we think about the decisions that the families that are serviced by the Department of Human Services that they have to make that lead to food insecurity for them, whether or not they can repair a car that is vital to them getting to work, to taking their loved one to school, to whatever is needed, all of these unexpected expenses can really impact an individual's ability to meet their basic needs. So when you think about those that are dealing with food insecurity, it's not people that are unemployed, maybe people that, as we talked about, being underemployed, or there's an interruption in employment that is totally outside of that person's, realm of control. So, and we have had people that have come to us for assistance who had an abrupt change in their lives, maybe having a loved one die, having an accident, and now having to access social services that they never had to access before in their lives. So, when we talk about changing the narrative, it's really looking at everyone that could be impacted. And I think one thing that COVID taught us is that anyone can be impacted by food insecurity.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add, we all know, I think everyone in the audience as well, is that food insecurity has this interconnected component, right? With housing, transportation, technology, healthcare. And so we need to look at the complete picture. And we know, and it's in the news all the time, the affordability of housing and the cost of childcare. So we have to look at all of those other factors that are contributing to those challenges that make food insecurity something that we see at Greenwich United Way and try to help families with is early childhood scholarships. We know the high cost of early childhood in Greenwich. So we try to give scholarships so that they can, use the money that they're not paying for child care for food and other things. So it's looking at the complete picture.
I just wanted to make one point about the state of Connecticut that I'm proud to say, and many people may already know this, that the state of Connecticut was the first state to pass the baby bond bill in 2021, and it went into effect July 1st of this year. So any child that is born who is covered by Husky, by Medicaid at the time, will have a bond put aside for them that they can access between the ages of 18 and 30. And there's been a recent change in that bill just in terms of the funding of it. But, again, I'm smiling when I think about it, because when we think about some of the underlying issues and we think about the opportunity gaps, and the achievement gaps, the wealth gaps, this is working towards getting closer to closing it. So I'm just extremely proud that I live in a state where, this is possible.
Giving those children something to inherit, right? Resources, accumulated wealth, so important. A couple of things that come to mind, and Danielle, your comments. So New Lebanon is universal school lunch, and it qualifies for CEP, and Rob can speak to this better than I, but I will say that in working on the policy for universal school lunch, I heard over and over and over how kids do refuse lunch to avoid the stigma and judgment. And in speaking to the former principal of New Lebanon right before she left, Allie Michelson, she said, it is just so wonderful to see children from, cross class sitting together, sharing a meal. Everybody eats. It's not an awkward environment. But the thought of a cafeteria, is already challenging for kids. And to only hold the, the tension of not being able to eat is very, very challenging. So New Lebanon is the one school in our district that is universal. Anyone have any questions before I move on to the next part of our, yeah. Oh. We just passed universal breakfast, but not universal lunch. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question.
You would need to, like I mentioned before, you need to fill out the FRL application, and you can find that on the Greenwich Public Schools website.
The percentage of kids, and yes, Megan, you can speak to that. Yeah. I happen to have the numbers. This is huge. It is huge. And I will say a couple of things. Greenwich Public Schools, and I don't know if I'm going to frame this right, but they filled the gap. So if you are reduced, you are now free. So, oh, that is statewide. Okay. Okay. And then fabulous clarification. That's huge. So just quickly stats. So we have New Lab 43, Hamilton Ave 38, Julian Curtis 37, Western 28. So all of those schools will be eligible for universal lunch. Yes. I saw Beth, and then we'll go to Katerina. So Beth, yes. Yes. It's a great question. I know it's changed a lot over the years. It's evolved. I mean, it used to be really bad. It used to be like the color of your tray, but that has since shifted to more, I was speaking to Blaze, and it's now all coded. So I don't know. Can you answer that? Can anyone in the room answer that question as to how they, yes, Megan? And then you had a second question, Beth? Okay. It's a really great question. And, you know, we all are familiar with. Yeah. And we just had the Stop and Shop close in Glenville. So technically people are relying on Citarella. And if you don't have a car, therein lies a problem. Yeah.
I was going to add to that
Yep.
too. I know with the community and the farmers markets, when people do sometimes have a coupon from, could be United Way of Stanford, they come in and they don't know which vendors will take those coupons or SNAP or the special programs. And oftentimes they can't speak the language very well either. So they do feel a great stigma having to walk around to the vendors and ask them. There aren't usually signs up if they take the various SNAP or other programs. So that's another area where we could use to
Do you have a
work on
comment?
the stigma there.
Just in general, I know we were able to collect this information to find out, working with the town to do the report that was needed, the food assessment report for the Sustainable Connecticut application. So we collected this information in 2021. We are now in the very beginning of the process collecting it for the 2024 report. And I think, you know, in terms of lessons learned, it's like we have the information, now what do we do with it, right? And so what you're talking about is going to be an actionable step. You know, how do we think about approaching that particular, you know, grocery store and advocating, because there are certain requirements that are needed, you know, that are required from the USDA regarding the sale of particular produce, the variety of it. So ensuring that they know what the facts are related to that and encouraging them to apply.
Back to your first question about like stigma, I know with breakfast, every school does it differently, right? So it's not like there's say you have 100 kids in your elementary school, not every kid, there's not 100 breakfasts out, right? So how you distribute that breakfast may give some type of indication that kid may or may not need or be on, you know, FRL. Does that make sense? So if they're only making breakfasts for the kids that need it or demonstrate that they need it, that could give an indication that that family is on FRL.
Any other questions at this time? Yeah.
Can I like make a comment to Citarella? I'm just a regular citizen. And that's what we call. Eating loss. Get somebody.
It sounds like there are some people interested in taking that space, but I don't know, there've been a lot of rumors, so I don't know who, who may know the answers to that, but still might take a little while. Yeah. Yes. Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I don't know more about the details. I will say, yeah. Yeah, so I do know in Greenwich, after talking to Blaze, that yes, it is coded and But however, my colleagues on a state level with the Farm to School Collaborative, and Reggie, I know you can also speak to this, that it's difficult. In fact, a lot of schools acquire debt. A lot of the food service directors they're in a very difficult and painful decision on whether or not to allow a child to eat, but and if they do, the school acquires debt, and it becomes very problematic. So thus part of why universal lunch is so important. So I'm going to just shift gears just a little bit and talk about and highlight some of the initiatives that are addressing food insecurity throughout Connecticut, from a grassroots to policy and everything in between. And I have to say that these initiatives that I'm going to highlight here are really my North Star and my inspiration behind starting the Food Shed Network. But before I flip through these slides, I'm going to go back to that article from A Growing Culture and offer some really what I thought very thought-provoking questions that I think will be helpful in our discussion. The first is, why do we keep treating hunger as a technical problem rather than an issue of political will? What if we measured hunger in more diverse ways? What if we measured it morally? What if we approached hunger not by measuring how to overcome scarcity, but instead by examining how to allocate abundance? And what if the institutions tasked with measuring hunger were forced to explain why record high food production is leaving so many people without access to proper sources of nourishment? And I'm going to say that one more time because I think that is like the question of our day. Why? So again, what if we ask the institutions who are tasked with measuring hunger, if we ask them to explain why record high production is leaving so many people without access to proper sources of nourishment? The UN declares food as a human right at the end of the day. So the following initiatives, they need our attention, they need our resources. This is what food justice looks like. This is what equity looks like. This is about nourishment. This is about solidarity. Solidarity, in preparing for this conversation, I did a little bit of a deeper dive, and solidarity is really about saying, like, I see your story and mine. Where you are now, I could be there tomorrow. Where I am today, you could be there tomorrow. That's solidarity. Overcoming barriers. They break assumptions and fears, and they provide an opportunity for us to choose to build community and relationships. So I'm going to start with a quote, if I can read it here. When asked what he would say to those entering food justice work, Reggie St. Collin, who is with us tonight, the founder of Fridgeport and proponent of the Food and Nutrition Policy Analyst, which he just broke down for us. You talk to people in your neighborhood to identify the greatest needs. Mutual aid is showing love for your community without asking anything in return. And I go to that picture and I go to that quote and I go to Reggie so often because he really is the spirit of food justice. He embodies it. He knows more than anyone how to build relationships, cross-class, cross-race. He is my friend and my hero in so many ways. And I'm just so grateful that you're here with us, and I'm going to call on you again to talk about Bridgeport. But for now, let's go to the next slide. So these are the alliances of support here in Greenwich. We have Neighbor to Neighbor, we have the Department of Human Services, we have Food Rescue, we have the Greenwich United Way, Barbara's House, Boys and Girls Club, Jewish Family Services, who were going to be here tonight and for obvious reasons are not, but okay, hello, thank you. Meals on Wheels, Waste Free Greenwich, Greenwich Community Gardens. We have Jan D'Angelo with us, Versailles Farm, Sleepy Cat Farm, and Coffee for Good. Coffee for Good, and well, we have Kim Gregory here, who is very close to Coffee for Good. We don't have Deb Rogan, but Coffee for Good trains disabled, those who are disabled, how to brew coffee and put them in the workforce, which is just an amazing initiative in our community. Sleepy Cat Farm donates food, as well as Versailles, as well as Greenwich Community Gardens, to some of these other agencies that we just discussed. Next slide. So Pay What You Can is an emerging model. Community Kitchen, which is just emerging. Mark Bittman is actually leading that initiative. Gather 55 in Hartford, the Wild Ramp in North Carolina, the Grocery on Broad in Hartford. These are food retail models, both grocery and restaurant, that are emerging, that are difficult, that are dependent on philanthropic funding for support. But this is a Pay What You Can. All are welcome. Mutual aid, that falls into, again, food rescue. I see that as a mutual aid, gleaning from farms, share tables in schools, open access refrigerators, farm to pantry. Next slide. Our public school system, huge lever for an equitable and just food system. We've talked quite a bit about universal school meals. I will say that initiative, or that policy, will come up again in the spring. I will be representing our community, and I welcome anyone who wants to help speak to that. It's very important for Greenwich and our community to show up in Hartford as much as we can, especially when it comes to the gravity of food insecurity. So I welcome anyone. Massachusetts, Vermont, Minnesota, New Mexico, Michigan, Colorado, and Maine and California are following. Share tables, Waste Free Greenwich. Julie Deschamps could not be here today. Oh, Julie's here. Oh my God, Julie, hi. I didn't see, I have to get my glasses. So Waste Free Greenwich, amazing. They partner with Food Rescue. There we go. They partner with Food Rescue, and as a way to divert perfectly good food from going into the waste stream. They open up tables, and kids are open to taking food. And Julie, maybe you can speak to that a little later. The Connecticut Farm to School Collaborative, Local on Your Tray. This is about educating children about food, about nutritious food. And then the Northeast and Connecticut Farm to School Institute. That is a new initiative that teaches children how to scratch cook. They take kids on farm visits, how to grow food. Nothing is more of a, what can we say? Yeah, than teaching children how to grow food. It is essential, how to work with the soil, how to value food, right? Because then you are set up for life with that value. Nothing more important than that. And that, of course, Alice Waters, it's her big push, and she's doing a phenomenal job in California. Access to land, water. This is huge. We won't go into a deep dive on land access, but I will say that by way of urban farms, our friends Green Village Initiative, Reservoir Farm, Knox Farm, Park City Harvest, Blissful Awakening. A lot of these farms are in Bridgeport and Hartford. We have Greenwich Community Gardens, huge lever, right? We need to support Greenwich Community Gardens. This, Armstrong Court, I don't know if anyone has visited that garden. It is one of the most, I think, special places in our community. You go there and there are all nationalities, where people have sent their seeds from their homeland, and they're growing their certain pepper and their squash and their just very special food from where they grew up. And it's just a really beautiful place. And a lot of that produce is donated to neighbor. Access to our shoreline. Joan Seguin couldn't be here tonight, our Shellfish Commission, but people can technically get a permit and dig for clams. My grandfather did it, dig for clams and oysters, but access to fishing, right? But that's, not as easy as one might think. And then, of course, foraging for wild foods. The more we develop, the more we don't have access to wild food sources. Next slide. Entrepreneurship, again, Coffee for Good. Indoor farms such as Nourish, Micro to Life, Park City Harvest, Click, Willimantic, they're doing an amazing job in the northeast part of our state, in the Willimantic, otherwise known as the Quiet Corner, I believe one of the lowest wealth communities in our state. And they run a commercial kitchen space and offer cold storage for people who want to start a food business. They're doing a fantastic job, as well as Reset. And then, of course, City Seed, Sanctuary Kitchen. They work specifically with immigrant women on being able to showcase their food and sell their food at farmers markets in New Haven. And then farmers markets, another huge lever for an equitable and just food system, in that farmers markets are community hubs. Food rescue frequents a lot of our markets here. I know the Old Greenwich Farmers Market as well as Westport Farmers Market, double SNAP dollars. The hard part is that you have to make sure and work with the market. It usually takes an outside organization to work with that farmers market to go through the logistics behind accepting the EBT cards. I think that's it. Next slide. And I just actually, if you can just go back, this is the Danbury Farmers Market in particular. Oh, so these photos, so we have Coffee for Good, and then we have Click Willimantic, and then we have Sean and Rich, who are just rock stars, Park City Harvest and Bridgeport. And then that amazing photo of the Latina woman there with the carrots is from Danbury Farmers Market. And they've got it going on. They accept everything. They're about community, really, really special place. And then next photo. Policy, save the best for last. So again, universal school meals, absolutely huge. Connecticut Grown, Connecticut Kids grants. This is a USDA funding that has come through through our Department of Agriculture, where they're allocating grants to different organizations and helping kids grow and learn how to work with food. So the local school food incentive program, this is something I'm actually working with the Greenwich Public School System on, which I'm very excited about it. So this is funding that has come through the USDA. Connecticut, I believe, received $1.8 million. The town of Greenwich will receive 8,000 of that, and they have opted into this program. And so they will be spending that 11,000 on local food procurement, which is absolutely wonderful. And then phase two, if phase one goes well, phase two will be in later in 2024. Now, the catch with this is that we have centralized our food system, right? So we don't have a lot of infrastructure. So, you know, Dan Nanarello and Ann Cabrillo are looking around, or our food service directors looking around and saying, like, we don't have a farm locally, right? Like, how is this going to happen? And so that is part of what I'm going to be supporting them with, is trying to access that local food. Because a lot of the distributors don't necessarily go local, which is, you know, another complicated layer to all this. But the reason this is so important is because, again, if we had universal school lunch, if we had, you know, any kid, whether it's universal or not, will have access to that local food, right? So the idea is to use these institutions, because not only do they build a food economy, huge, local food economy, but they are having access to that fresh produce. And then the food nutrition policy analysts, which Reggie just spoke to. Food policy councils are huge. Greenwich Food Alliances, right? It's about just convening, understanding each other's work. Local zoning. We had a big debate in town around chickens, and Myra was a part of that. And, you know, whether or not it came down to a certain feet, and if you have a small lot, that feet doesn't really work, and it becomes a little bit of a barrier to raising chickens, and yet everyone should be able to raise chickens. And then prescription produce, which is the GUSNIP, which is a USDA funded federal program. So it's 8:09. I want to take more questions, and anyone who is a part of any of these initiatives, well, first of all, all these initiatives that I just spoke to are on the Food Shed Network website. You can go to the URLs and you can explore them more. But I want to open up to questions, and I also want to have anyone comment if you're a part of any of these initiatives statewide and you feel like you want to speak to them, please stand and feel free to do so. I see. Yes. So if you have a question or we want to talk, we're actually recording this. Julie, do you want to talk about the share tables? I hate to ask you to come all the way up here, but.
Do I have to press this? No, it's on. Okay, great. Hi, I'm Julie Deschamps from Waste Free Greenwich. I'm the chair and founder. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about reducing waste of food in our public school system. We this year and last year are really digging into our Zero Waste Schools program, and a big part of that is reducing wasted food. And I want to give a shout out to the Green Schools Committee, the PTAC Green Schools Committee. I see some of you here, Katerina, and also to the Facilities Department at Greenwich Public Schools, especially Blaise Leviton and Mark Bria, who've been really instrumental in helping us along. So the first thing that we really wanted to do was prevent the food waste in the first place. And really that is our best strategy, prevention. And we do that through two ways. First, share tables that Ali mentioned. They're basically refrigerators. Any uneaten, unopened foods can go in there. So yogurts, milk, applesauce, cheese sticks, that kind of thing, can all go in there, and any child who would like extra servings is welcome to go and take whatever they'd like. And I can tell you, I was just at New Lebanon School this week, and by the end of the day, everything was gone from the refrigerator. The kids are still hungry and they want extra servings. The second strategy that we're using is external food donation. We're working very closely with Food Rescue US. So far, ISD, International School at Dundee, and Old Greenwich School have programs working with Food Rescue US. They have parent volunteers who very generously donate their time to pick up the food and bring it to receiving agencies in town. And maybe Danielle wants to speak a little bit more about that. Thank you.
I'll just add that it's a wonderful source of nutrition for them. Lots of the food that we pick up, like Julie said, is dairy. A lot of it is sliced up cucumbers and carrots. Like, it couldn't be better, more healthy food that we're rescuing. And it goes to Pacific House, it goes to Barbara's House, it goes to Kids in Crisis. We're really looking forward to getting the other schools on board and the high school, so they will have hopefully a lot of extra food to donate to those in need here.
Hey again. Would you be able to go to the slides so I could show it? It's easier to like visualize. So yeah, I do something called Fridgeport, which is a series of community fridges located around Connecticut. One on the left is in New Haven, the one in the middle is in Bridgeport, and the one on the right is in am I saying that right? On the right is in Hartford. But either way, it's take what you want, leave what you can. It's not a nonprofit, it's a mutual aid. So it's pretty much like a bunch of text messages, a bunch of emails, some signals, hanging out in front of a refrigerator, but it's a community building aspect first and foremost. And through that, we reach about 1,200 to 1,500 people a week. We get about 3 to 5 tons of food a week from everything from the Stop and Shops to like places of worship. Ideally, we just tell people if you have a tomato and you're not going to use it, just come on down in the fridge. Like, look at it, it looks nice, right? It's all colorful and stuff. So we're like, hey, come hang out. People like hanging out near fridges and eating. Who would have thought? So it's pretty much like a real easy way to get conversation. That's how I build a lot of like policy ideas, just by chilling around, sucking on Go-Gurts and talking to people. So yeah, that's what Bridgeport is, a community building effort first and foremost. Like I'm just the face and the person who's like has a privilege to be around doing it, but the work is like the people in the middle, the Adas, the Marias, they're the people who do the work. I'm just able to contextualize it at 50,000 square feet and verbalize it, but it's all the community that does most of it. And yeah, that's unofficially. Officially? Oh, I didn't know you could say that. Oh, I don't know. Oh yeah, no, officially then. Yeah, sorry.
Very officially.
All right, yeah, then very officially. It's always like we do a lot of gray area stuff. There's a lot of people with like not licenses and stuff like that. So we reach a lot of people like that. The mentality is like it's like a firefighter. Like you don't look at a fire and say use 2 buckets of water. We just say like, all right, come over, take as much food as you want, and ideally like the community can hold you down for the rest. So yeah, we do a lot of gray area stuff. So I don't know when to say official or unofficial, but yeah, food rescue has been holding us down since the beginning. Yeah, that's what it is. Oh. Yeah. Oh no, you can speak probably too better than me.
So we did, it came up actually in our Greenwich Food Alliance meeting. We did talk about it, and Gabby looked into it. It needs, and maybe you can speak to this, like what the actual infrastructure, but it needs to be obviously access to electricity. It needs access to electricity. And it needs a space where people can oversee it, right? And so typically you partner with churches.
Yeah,
Tell us more about your partners, but we did look into it and it's a little complicated.
yeah.
Yeah. Didn't,
So it depends on how hard you work. Like I don't like working that hard. I'm not that handy. I'm not that good at organizing. I don't really do much. Like I like sleeping a lot. So effectively, like it's a shed program, but I was like, hey, like the electricity is the need. That is what you need. You need electricity because it's very expensive to get electricity outside. But outside of that, that's a shed. That's like a Home Depot shed right there. Home Depot shed in the fridge. You're not looking at the most complicated thing. But we made it complicated because sometimes efficiency is not the most efficient thing to do. So we slowed it down to community on. Like that was a 4-week project to build a shed. That's like a fireable offense if that was for a job, you know? So, but we slow down like, hey, you can't pay for stuff, but if you want to swing a hammer, come hang out with us someday in the summer. And yeah, so it's built through whoever wants to come by. People would walk by and be like, hey, what are you doing? I'd be like, me? I'm the one sitting over there, but those people over there are working. And then they'd go over there and help out working and or help work. But that's effectively a system.
so we're exploring
The Glenville, where the Stop and Shop used to be.
So I just want to add, so I'm Haley, also with Food Rescue US. I want to add a few things about why Bridgeport is so successful so that you all, when you're thinking about places that you may consider in Greenwich, the appropriate places come to mind. So this location is in Bridgeport where we serve. The reason why we can say that we are officially donating to Bridgeport is because it is kept very clean. There's always somebody there to accept the donation, sort the donation, and appropriately place the donation in the shed and the fridge that they've created. So it needs access. So all the things that we're talking about needs access to electricity. It needs people really managing it. Yes, a home gardener can drop off at any time a basket of tomatoes, but a volunteer who is potentially rescuing from a Trader Joe's cannot drop off just boxes of food at a fridge and expect it to be handled. So there does need to be a leader, a leading group, people involved, so that it's appropriately managed. I also want to add another reason why we can say that we are officially donating to Bridgeport is that prior to earlier this year, what covered food rescue organizations and donating parties from liability concerns is the Bill Emerson Food Donation Act that covers food donors who donate their food to registered nonprofits in good faith. And those good faith measures include things like proper refrigeration for foods and freezing foods and appropriate date labels being distributed to folks who are receiving food through those food programs. In 2023, the US passed the Food Donation Improvement Act, and that further strengthened the original Bill Emerson Act, and that allows organizations like Bridgeport that are not a registered nonprofit to also allow for full coverage of liability from the food donor's perspective. So I also share that because there is a federal legislative push to create these systems that allow for greater food justice policies in place. And so what is so special about places like where we live right now is that we really are at the forefront of these movements. And so conversations like this are particularly empowering because they're not happening everywhere in the US. So I want to leave on that positive note, but I do have a question, so I'll come back later.
Maybe Reggie could talk about how it's that house. What's on that house?
So yeah, the fridge is just like the moneymaker, the branding. But no, there's like inside, it's a church. So like the church is, always running. So inside the church, you have like 3 to 4 fridges. And again, the person in the middle, Ada, is like Bridgeport. Again, I just have the capacity to talk, but it's a community thing. So it's like, so yeah, it's a church. At any time, there's 8 to 9 people running. There's 3 or 4 fridges. It's a constantly moving thing. Like food flies, like 800 pounds of food. It sounds like a lot, but that's maybe 2 hours. Like you put it out a few times, that'll go fast, especially with like, we toss percentages around. Like I could say 2% here, but that's thousands and thousands of people. Like when you break it down, and I live in Bridgeport, it's 19 square miles. It's not a big place with 140,000 people. I forget the number. It's like a quarter or something, more than a quarter, but that's tens of thousands of people. So food flies real quick. And I tend to rant and lose myself, so I forgot the question, but I hope I touched on it at some point. Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, so it's a church with a bunch of fridges in the inside, and a great community, always running about 7 days a week.
Quick question, Reggie. Do most of the people walk to the fridge? Are they driving there or walking, or is it mostly the neighborhood?
Yeah, it was intentional. The fridge, it's in the hollow area of Bridgeport, which is a food desert. So it was like, it's also like it's one of the most densely populated parts of Bridgeport. There's a lot of like 10,000 Nicaraguans moved there 2-3 years ago. So yeah, there's also multifamily on top of multifamily. So in like a 10-block radius, there's, I think 40,000, 20,000, or 30,000, 40,000 people. So yeah, 90% of people walk. Transportation is a big issue in Connecticut, in Bridgeport also. Like East End, 40% of people don't have licenses. Like, so yeah, walking is a big thing that people do. There's 4-something bus stops. We also get kids just as much as we get adults. So yeah, a lot of walking to it.
Yeah, come on up. Yeah, just for recording purposes.
I'm Bob D'Angelo, and I was sitting there counting the number of schools in Greenwich, and I think I came up with 20 in terms of cafeterias. Basically, they make food every day. Lunches, basically. A couple schools, private schools have multiple cafeterias, and Julie answered part of the question. Is some of the schools are participating. I personally think, I don't think that there shouldn't be any leftover food at any of the schools, basically. So I think that's a great opportunity, food rescue, working that. But Bobby Walker worked at the Boys and Girls Club. I worked there. We knew that kids coming after school, try to get them to get their homework done on an empty stomach was hard. So they give them a snack after school. Boys and Girls Club has transportation. I'm just wondering creatively if there's a way to the schools that the club sends their vans to pick up kids at school, if there was a way to safely, liability-wise, to pick up leftover food at some of the schools that they go to, basically. And then the last thing, and is it just a question of other models, food rescue that work like that? The other thing I say with a little bit of humor is I love riding a bike. I'm always looking for an excuse to ride a bike. I think there's a lot of people in town that like to ride a bike, and think you could put together a group of people that would be very interested. They love to ride a bike, and I think they would love to help people in Greenwich. They could be transportation. I have a little trailer that I tow around, that I tow groceries and stuff. I think there'd be a bunch of people that would love to go to schools, or Raphael's Bakery, know them real well. They have leftover food at the end of the day, and be transportation capability to bring it to agencies or people that need it. So do a lot of the schools participate in we have 20 cafeterias or restaurants in Greenwich that are called schools. There shouldn't be any leftover food.
Oh, right now there are 2 of them. We got a little bit of pushback in the beginning, so due to Julie doing some heavy lifting, we've got the program started again this year. She's gonna be blazing a trail through all those schools.
I mean,
We'll be there.
I'm just curious, what is the pushback to that?
Yes. Yes, so the private schools are doing it, the hospital is doing it, Greenwich Academy is doing it. They've been doing it for a while. It's the public schools that we're working in. You mentioned Eagle Hill. I like the idea. We'll talk more about the having the Boys and Girls Club take some food with them. That may be a very good idea too.
It's question time for me. So I want to go back to the title of the day, A Tale of Two Towns. That's what I think is really, again, unique about this space and this conversation. It's different from other food insecurity or food justice conversations that I have. What is so unique about this space, one, is that the threshold at $150,000 a year for a family is just unbelievable. That to me means that many good paying jobs still would not allow somebody to live like a fulfilling, I don't want to say that word, so I don't know what the right word is exactly, but to live a really robust life in Greenwich. And so that to me means that anyone could be needing the services that you all have discussed. And so what I've heard from other places that we work is that there is this stigma. So for example, I know a pantry program that has in multiple towns, residents from one town will go to another town's pantry so that the volunteers at that pantry, who could be their neighbors, other community members, aren't recognizing them. And I'm curious, what are things that this room can do, we can do to help destigmatize? We are those neighbors. We are those volunteers. What are things that we can do to create a more welcoming space for people who do need access to these services, and destigmatize, again, the perception of food insecurity?
Maybe Brent would
I
like
was just
to,
gonna
and
say,
JFS.
Want to speak
And
to that? Is that where we putting you on the spot too much? Brent's our new executive director at Neighbor to Neighbor. It just started. Yeah, no, I know.
I mean, I hope it can answer this properly. We have a lot of corporate volunteers, student volunteers. I see a lot of volunteers in this room. I think people are very conscious of when people come in, be very welcoming. I think if you see someone you move to the side and make sure maybe at first nobody sees you, because you do want people to feel comfortable coming in. I think we feel very fortunate, Neighbor, that we have a great new space that I think is light and bright. We used to be, I don't know if you know about us, but we used to be in the basement of a church, which was, great for a long period of time. But, now we have all this light, and I think it makes the volunteers feel great. It's easier to get food into the building. We have more freezer space, more refrigerator space. A lot of the staff speaks multiple languages, which I think is helpful. Some food we've brought in is more culturally, what people are used to. And I remember when I first started out being a volunteer, someone come in and say, well, what is this? And, we'd look it up, and we'd look up recipes, and we'd swap recipes using a few things in the pantry, but it's always better. You know, we all feel comfort from the food we grew up with. So we're trying to incorporate that too. So I think at least one of the things that made me love Neighbor when I first moved here is I felt it was very welcoming and warm. And so we try really hard to project that with everybody that walks into the building.
And I'll just say very briefly, it's been not quite 3 months I've been a Neighbor. There's a wonderful atmosphere. In my first week at Neighbor, I was walking through a hallway and I saw a couple clients. I shared this with Dimitri the other day, actually. Saw a couple clients, and of course I just said hello, good afternoon, like anyone should do. And as I was walking away, I heard the woman whisper, the older woman in a wheelchair, heard her whisper to her family member, "Everyone here is just so nice." And I said, "Oh, I picked the right place to come to." So I think just treating people with dignity is really important. And one thing we're trying to do at Neighbor is we're expanding our services. So in addition to food, we're providing household essentials because a lot of those items aren't available through SNAP. So we're really, like Rob also said, trying to look at the whole picture to see how we can partner with other agencies and provide as many resources or to use that metaphor, as many tools that the family can get in their toolkit in order to survive.
And Melissa Nee with JFS.
Hi, how are you? So at JFS, we're a little different. We have a weekly farm market and we partner with Food Rescue. But our farm market came out of COVID, actually. We were actually working very closely with Neighbor to Neighbor. And then we developed a Families Affected by COVID program. And it was all encompassing, including a weekly farm market that actually Mike's Organic used to donate. He pretty much kept us in business for most of COVID, if not all of COVID, up until recently. But he was amazing. Never say anything, negative about him. And then we would supplement whatever he provided with dairy and produce, whatever we could get that we felt like they needed extra. So we did that through donations. We were able to add that. And now, for a while now, we've been working with Food Rescue, which is amazing. And they come every week, the day before. We have these wonderful volunteers. One of them turned out to be one of our great volunteers with our refugee program. And so we are able to incorporate that and our partnership with ShopRite. We work with them to get other produce for our clients, and we have a weekly farm market outside that they can come to, which is fabulous. And we also do a supermarket shopping for senior citizens program, which we've been doing forever, where we go to our clients' homes, we'll pick up a shopping list, we'll take their SNAP card, their credit card, cash, whatever it is that they want, and we will go to the supermarket, grocery shop for them, come back, help them unload it, put it away. And we pretty much did that all throughout COVID, except for the very beginning when we were working with Neighbor to Neighbor, when we still brought them their groceries. So thanks to everybody in the community. We've really been working very closely with everybody in the community to provide these services to our clients, and we will continue to. Actually, we recently were approached by, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Friendly Fridge. It's in Westchester. So somebody approached us about, they wanted to donate a refrigerator to us and freezers. And they're actually very interested in doing it. It doesn't matter that they're in New York. They are interested in donating those refrigerators and freezers around Connecticut. So that's something that we could discuss at another time, because we definitely started that conversation with them. And they do it's right on Main Street, but they do prepared foods. And then they leave them in the freezer or the refrigerator, and you could pick up a tray of, meat sauce or, whatever it is to bring home to your family. But that's something else we could discuss. But
Thank you.
And
sorry, actually, this isn't even my area of expertise. I'm standing in for someone tonight. So I hope I answered what you needed.
Yes, that was great.
And Janet with Barber's House, did you want to add anything about stigma, ways you reduce stigma?
And I know we're
Changing
close
hats.
to 8:30.
I'll be fast. So I mean, I think that that's a continual concern, and I think Barbara's House and all of these organizations do a lot to consider the dignity of everyone who is participating in these programs. I know the genesis of Barbara's House getting involved was COVID, and Barbara's House had an after-school homework club, and they provided the kids with snacks, and suddenly schools were closing, the programs were closing. They said, well, the kids aren't getting snacks. What do we do? That's sort of an essential part of their day. And they said, well, if the kids aren't getting snacks, what about their families? And it just sort of grew. And I think to your point, it's like layers of the onion. You know, once we sort of start to think about food insecurity, it's much bigger. It ripples throughout our community. So thank you to everyone in this room who is working on this problem.
And one last, I just wanted to quickly see, is anyone from Ableist here tonight? I know someone was going to try to, oh, great. Would you like to address well, you probably see less stigma, but I guess we were also curious about how children with special needs are affected by food insecurity, what you see at Ableist.
Job in the community. And thank you. They have jobs in the community and they're only allowed to make up to a certain amount of money or else they lose their benefits. So their SNAP isn't typically enough to get them through the month with food. So we're trying to supplement, get them, connected to resources in the community and things. And, I've really found so many resources tonight. I mean, thank you so much. Start to connect people to Department of Social Services and things.
So yeah, I mean, our food insecure, our neighbors, they're disabled, they are elders. So thank you. I just have to say one thing is I forgot Greenwich Land Trust. Greenwich Land Trust works with our youth corp in town, and they have a beautiful vegetable garden, and they provide produce to Greenwich Community Gardens, to neighbor. But I didn't want to close out without acknowledging that partnership. We're going to close. This has been fantastic. And I thank you all. I thank our panelists. Rob had to leave to pick up his daughters. We are going to carry on the conversation in a couple of ways. One is I would love to have a panel discussion that does a deeper dive into these different initiatives. The second is we're going to partner with Bridgeport or Foodshed Forum. We'll partner with Bridgeport, Food Rescue, and Save the Sound, Alex Rodriguez, on a tale of two counties, addressing food insecurity in Fairfield County. And hopefully, if we get that far, a tale of two states addressing food insecurity in Connecticut. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for your presence this evening, for your care, for this community. And we look forward to engaging you all further.
Oh, this is really heavy. We're very strong.